Today on Alex Autos, we're out here taking a look at the 2015 Audi A3 Cabriolet, also known as the A3 Convertible. This is actually one of my favorite cars for the 2015 model year, but you're going to have to stick around to the end to know exactly why. The convertible market has been shrinking. There are actually fewer convertible models available in the United States today than there were just a number of years ago. And next year we'll be saying goodbye to the Volkswagen EOS, which is actually unrelated to the A3 Convertible. Because there aren't that many convertibles to compare the A3 to in the United States, you'll notice that I will be comparing this vehicle to vehicles that the sedan version would not be compared to. So I will be comparing this to things like the Mustang or the Camaro convertible, and I wouldn't normally compare the A3 sedan with a Mustang or a Camaro coupe. Audi's A3 sedan is the least expensive Audi available in the United States, starting just under $30,000, and the Cabrio is the least expensive convertible by far in Audi's lineup, starting just under $36,000. That actually makes this one of the more affordable convertibles available in the US because there aren't too many convertibles under 30 grand. The A3 Cabrio looks very much like the rest of the Audi lineup in the United States. This is not quite as aggressive as some of the more expensive Audi models like the A7, however. Because Audi is a luxury brand, we find standard HID headlamps, which is not something you normally find at a $35,000 starting price, and we have LED light pipes on the inside. If you do get upper level trims of the A3 Cabrio, you will find LED headlamps. Although we do have standard bi-xenon headlamps, and by bi-xenon that means that the same lamp module is used for high beam and low beam, these do not steer in the corners like you'll find in some of the competition. Our model doesn't have fog lamps down here, and then we have this very large Audi grille up front. I find the grille and the overall look very attractive. It's a very elegant and restrained design, so if you're after something a bit more exciting, you're going to have to go to a different brand because Audi in general likes flowing curves and a simpler design language. They also love this very large grille that has sometimes been called the Billy the Big Mouth Bass grille. The grille is definitely large, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. When you look at the A3 in your rearview mirror, it definitely looks like an Audi is coming your way. Audi's A3 sedan is not a terribly long vehicle, although it does price itself very similarly to top-end spec Honda Accords, Ford Fusions, etc. It's not in the same size category. It's actually a size below that. The same goes for the A3 Cabrio. This is not a large convertible by any stretch of the imagination. However, it is bigger than something like a Mercedes-Benz SLK. The SLK may seem like a strange vehicle to compare the A3 Cabrio to, but we now have the SLK 250, which has a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine under the hood, and it is about the same price as the model we're taking a look at right here. The big difference, of course, is that we have 4 seats in the A3 Convertible. Now, 4 seats isn't necessarily unusual. However, these 4 seats are actually usable in the A3. The reason those rear seats are usable is right here under the hood, because the A3 is a front-wheel drive based vehicle and the engine is mounted across the front in a transverse fashion rather than down the vehicle like you'd find in something like a BMW 2 Series. The BMW 2 Series proportionally has a much longer hood, and that really means that you get less interior room and less trunk room for the overall size of the vehicle. Like the front, the rear end styling of the A3 is relatively simple and elegant. We have these tail lamp modules which go from the body onto the trunk lid, and they also have light pipes inside to give it a particular design at night. The trunk lid has an integrated spoiler into it, so it lifts up right here at the end where we have the center mounted stoplight right over here, twin exhaust pipes right over there on the driver's side, and reflectors down below. You'll notice that we have 2 things missing, even on this particular vehicle, which is nicely equipped right around $43,000. We have no parking sensors on the back, and we don't have a backup camera either. Under the hood, things start out with a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine, and this is a transverse engine, which means it's mounted across the front, as I said earlier. That's different than other Audis, but the other thing you'll notice that's different than something like an A4, an A6, or an A8 is that this engine is almost entirely on top of the front axle. Front axle's right around here. The engine is very close to that front of the axle. Audi's other products in the United States, the engine is almost entirely in front of the transmission and the front axle, just based on their design. What that means to you is that the A3's weight balance is actually very good when you compare it with the rest of the Audi family. This 1.8-liter engine produces 170 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque. If you think that's not a whole lot of power, then you do need to know that the A3 is a very, very light vehicle. If that's not enough power for you, there is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It produces 220 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. The difference between those 2 engines isn't just the power level, it's also which wheels are doing the work for you. The 1.8-liter engine is a front-wheel drive only vehicle, and the 2-liter engine is all-wheel drive only in the United States. Both engines put power to the ground via a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. If you want to know more about dual-clutch transmissions, there is a separate video on my page on that as well. That dual-clutch transmission and the small engine designs help us get 24 miles per gallon city, 35 highway, and 28 combined with this 1.8-liter engine, and that only drops to 26 combined with the 2-liter turbo. Front seat comfort is very good, although unusually for a luxury branded vehicle, we don't have power seats in the A3. Instead, we have a 14-way adjustable driver's seat that includes the directions on this headrest right here, but only 4 of those directions are electrically adjustable, and those are the 4 different lumbar directions. It goes in and out as well as up and down. That means that we have about the same range of motion as most of the luxury competition, except that you can't get a memory system in the A3 because none of these directions are powered. On the flip side, however, the passenger seat right next to me has the same range of motion as the driver's seat. We also get a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion that helps give these front seats 8 out of 10 points. What makes the A3 Cabrio unique among convertibles is this back seat, because it's actually usable for adults. I'm 6 feet tall. With this front seat adjusted for me, I can actually hop in the back seat right here behind myself, pull the seat back, and I have about ½ an inch of legroom left. Obviously, this isn't the pinnacle of rear seat comfort, but for a vehicle the size of the A3, this back seat is incredibly accommodating. In fact, I would rate the back seat comfort just about as comfortable as BMW's 4 Series convertible, which is much bigger than this. I have this passenger seat adjusted for a 6'5" passenger I had in the vehicle. I can squeeze myself right over here onto the passenger side. It's not comfortable, but I could sit back here, actually strap myself in, and do this for 30-45 minutes or so. Like many convertibles, the A3 is a 4-passenger convertible, so there is no center seat. Aiding in cargo practicality, we have a split 50-50 folding rear seat with a moderately sized center pass-through. There's a separate video on child seats if you want to know how well they fit in the A3 Cabrio, but in a nutshell, the top tether anchor is on the back of the seat back right here because we have the rollover protection system that will deploy from right here. So you can't put a top tether across to the deck. That means that you do have to recline these rear seat backs, strap your child seat in, then put them back, and then pull that top tether tightly with the child seat in place. It is a little bit tricky. Convertibles frequently have a problem when it comes to cargo capacity because the top has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is usually the trunk. That is true for the A3, however, it only takes up a portion of the trunk, and you can regain that portion when the top is up. The A3's top does not go directly into the trunk. It actually goes into a separate compartment with its own lid. It's right here, this portion of the trunk area. Then we have a separate trunk lid right back here. So this actually opens up in that fashion, lid goes down into it, and then that occupies some of the area that you could put cargo in. Audi lets you access that cargo if the top is in the up position with a movable barrier. However, if I open up the trunk, you'll see that I can fit a 26-inch roller bag, 24-inch roller bag, and a small amount of hand luggage right back here, even with the top in its current position. This black section right here is the movable barrier that allows you to expand or contract the cargo area. You'll find the releases for the seat backs right over here on the side. With the roof in the up position, I'll open up the trunk and you can see what impact this has. This 24-inch roller bag can actually sit in this direction in the trunk. It's very difficult to pull it in or out, but once you get it in, it can sit in that position. That makes it an awful lot more practical for a wider variety of cargo. I was able to fit 3 of them across the back with some additional luggage on the side. Something that's becoming more of a novelty than a standard feature is a compact spare tire, and we do get one in the A3. That's very different than a wide variety of other convertibles where we have no spare tire. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'm going to have to give this 10 out of 10 points. We do have that spare tire under there, we have a surprising amount of cargo room, and we have an assist handle to help us close the trunk lid. You'll notice that we have outboard seatbelts in the rear passenger compartment, not inboard seatbelts. That makes this a little bit different than some of those other convertibles. Most of the rear compartment is composed of soft touch plastics. You'll find some hard touch plastics lower in this area down here. The brown center section is a soft touch plastic with a soft touch armrest, speaker grill right there in the center. This upper portion where you also may want to rest your arms is also a soft touch plastic, and these 2 holes that you see here are for the wind deflector that's installable on the rear. With the wind deflector in place, you snap up this portion and it reduces buffeting from the rear. Up front, we have fixed position shoulder belts for both the driver and the front passenger and 2-way adjustable headrests. Smaller drivers and smaller passengers may have troubles reaching that seatbelt if the seat is moved too far forward, but I had no problems. Unlike other entry-level luxury vehicles, we do not have pleather seats. We actually have real leather standard on the A3 that sets us apart from a lot of those other entries, because even BMW 3 Series and Mercedes-Benz C-Class vehicles don't have leather standard. Over on the door panels, we do have an awful lot of soft touch plastics going on. We have a soft touch upper portion right up here by the door handle, soft touch armrest, and this brown portion right there is all soft touch plastic. One thing that I'll note when taking a look at this door panel is that I do like the brown interior because it does help break up the black on the inside of the A3. If you got the black interior, things are very, very black. We have black seats, black doors, black dashboard, etc. It can be a little bit oppressive. The dashboard in the A3 has this simple and elegant design to it. Now I know some people have called this a little bit plain, but I actually like the look of this dashboard. I think it's simple, I think it's elegant. It's also easy to clean, which is important in a convertible. Our particular model has the aluminum trim running right across, and we have soft touch plastics on the upper dashboard and on the lower dashboard. We have a moderately sized glove compartment, had troubles fitting a tablet computer inside there. Owner's manual and other small items will fit without a problem. At the top of your screen, we have the Audi MMI display. If you want to know more about MMI, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to my dedicated infotainment review. We have two large air vents right below that I showed you earlier, and then we have the button bank. We have an awful lot of blanks in this button bank. Hazard lights right in the center, stability traction control, and then that screen retract and deploy button right over there. Some people really dislike blank buttons like this, but I think that this detracts from the interior an awful lot less than some manufacturers' button blanks, most notably Toyota and Lexus, which have large rectangular button blanks. This actually integrates very well into the overall theme of the dashboard. Below that, we have our standard dual zone climate control, 12-volt power outlet, a small storage cubby right below that, and then two large cup holders. One problem with these cup holders that I noticed, however, was that if you put a large American-style takeout drink, that'll actually hit buttons on the climate control system, can press buttons, and then you can end up with strange climate control settings every time you set your drink back in the holder. Below all of that, we have our MMI controls, direct access for navigation, telephone, radio, and media over there, and then these are contextual buttons that you'll see on the screen. This knob does not click side to side or up and down like you'll find on Command or BMW's iDrive, but it does have a finger writing recognition section right here in the center. Behind the MMI knob, we have our electric parking brake control and the control for the convertible roof. Between the two front seats, we have a small center armrest. It is extendable, so it slides forward and backward. It also has a ratchet mechanism to lift it into various heights and lock it there. If we open it fully, we have a fairly small center console. Thanks to the all-wheel drive system that's optional, I can put a wallet, a phone, and other small items right in there. This vehicle still uses the Audi-specific infotainment connector right here, so you can't just plug USB cables in. This particular vehicle has the older style Apple input, and then I have adapted that to a lightning connector that does work very well. Next to that music interface, we also have a charge-only USB port. Over on the driver's side, we have an attractive and very typical Audi display with a large tachometer on the left and a large speedometer on the right. We have a digital LED readout for the engine temperature as well as fuel level inside those gauges. The multi-information display between the speedometer and the tachometer is controlled via this button arrangement on the steering wheel. We choose our options right here. That's between telephone, navigation, etc. Change options within that selection with this button right here, and then scroll down the finer options with this scroll wheel, and then we click down to OK. Taking a closer look at that display, you can see we have our typical trip computer information right over here. On the trip computer side, distance to empty, distance traveled, average economy, speed, etc. We also have our Sirius XM display where we can actually choose channels right here on this screen. You can also click that other button, which was that list looking button, and you can actually change your source. We go on over, we also have the phone interface, so you can actually choose people from your phone's directory and then dial them right within there. We have our navigation display, shows us a compass if we do not have a destination right now selected. You can also scroll around and get some of that trip computer information down below, and that's using that little scroll wheel on the steering wheel. Moving out to the steering wheel, we have a 3-spoke design, large spoke down here on the bottom, smaller spokes on the side, sport grips right up here and down below as well. See those controls I showed you earlier over here on the left side of the steering column. On this side of the steering column, we have a voice command button, navigation instruction repeat button, and then we have a favorite button right here. This can be set to do various things within the MMI system. Volume up and down button right over here, and we click into mute. You'll notice that we don't have a dedicated track forward backward button on either side of the steering wheel. That's because you actually have to use this multi-information display and the scroll wheel to go track forward backward if you're on a media device or on an optical disc. We also don't have cruise control buttons because you'll find those on a stalk on the left side of the steering wheel, right next to the turn signal and high beam stalk. And then over here on the right, we have our windshield wiper stalk. There are a few key things you need to know about the Audi A3 up front. The first thing is the A3 is a very, very light vehicle. The next thing you need to know is that we have a dual clutch transmission, not an automatic in the A3, and that will feel a little bit different than a traditional automatic. This is an awful lot smoother, however, than the dual clutch transmissions that you'll find from Mercedes as well as from Ford. The last thing you need to know about the A3 convertible is that you can actually open this soft top going up to 31 miles an hour. So while we're out here on my favorite winding mountain road, I can actually open the top. I'm going about 30 miles an hour on this road, no problem opening or closing the top. That really makes the A3 an awful lot more convenient than your average convertible, because many of those convertibles out there will only let you operate the top when the vehicle is either completely stationary or going under about 15 miles an hour or so. That's especially critical when you're talking about hardtop competition, because the vast majority of the hardtops out there need to be completely stopped in order to operate the top. 30 miles an hour is the difference between annoying the traffic behind you when you've tried to lower your top at a stoplight and the light turns green, or just going with the flow of traffic while your top descends. The A3 Cabrio is not a particularly powerful vehicle. The 1.8-liter turbocharged version that we're taking a look at here has about the same power as your average mid-sized 4-cylinder sedan. If you get the 2-liter turbocharged version, we get about 220 horsepower out of that engine. That's still a little bit below your average mid-sized V6 sedan. Even though the Cabrio is light, that lack of power shows when it comes to acceleration. I ran from 0 to 60 in 8 seconds flat in this 1.8-liter front-wheel drive model. If you get the 2-liter turbocharged model, it does get a little bit faster, but it will still be a hair slower than the A3 sedan. That means that overall I'll give acceleration 6 out of 10 points. Even though I'm giving acceleration a lower number, part of that is because of what the A3 competes with. Naturally, the A3 competes with the BMW 2 Series convertible, but it also competes with the Mercedes-Benz SLK convertible, the Mustang convertible, the Camaro convertible, etc. There is no real direct competition for this vehicle now that there is no longer the Volvo C70 convertible, which was a very direct competitor to the A3. You could call the Volkswagen EOS a direct competitor. However, Volkswagen is canceling the EOS after this model year. The light curb weight really pays dividends when it comes to handling. The A3 sedan is one of the best handling front-wheel drive sedans available in the United States, and that really goes to this A3 convertible as well. This is an incredibly good handling front-wheel drive vehicle. It's an awful lot of fun out on these winding mountain roads. I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points when it comes to handling, even though this competes with those rear-wheel drive alternatives. Even though the A3 is obviously a front-wheel drive vehicle, the weight balance is not as far off as you might think, and that really does help out the handling, especially in neutral situations. Obviously, if you're after a very tail-happy vehicle or a vehicle that you could steer with your right foot, the A3 is not going to be that kind of vehicle. You're going to definitely need to get something like a BMW 2 Series. Sort of by the same token, if you've driven the Audi A5 convertible, I found the A5 convertible to be decidedly front-heavy. It definitely plows in the corners in a way that you normally associate with a front-heavy vehicle. That's not going on in the A3, so if you've driven the A5 convertible and you didn't find its dynamics very pleasing, I suggest you try the A3 convertible. It really is a very different kind of handling feel. When it comes to braking, thanks again to the light curb weight, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points. Stopping distances are short and fade resistance is very good. This isn't quite as good as some of those higher horsepower or higher performance versions of the competition because they generally get wider tires and upgraded brakes. Fuel economy comes in at 10 out of 10 points. The A3 has been scoring incredibly well, even though I've been driving the A3 fairly hard during this week. Been averaging 27.4 miles per gallon in 600 miles of very mixed driving. That's much better than you'll get in your average entry in this segment. That's thanks to the light curb weight as much as it is the 6-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. If you treat your A3 very gently out on the open highway, you'll have absolutely no troubles getting 35 to 36 miles per gallon between 65 and 70 miles an hour. Cabin noise is the one area where the A3 Cabrio lets us down a little bit, and that's because of the fabric soft top on this vehicle. I scored 73 decibels at 50 miles an hour, which is one of the louder entries in this segment. This is definitely louder than you'll find in something along the lines of a BMW 4 Series hardtop convertible, with which I think the A3 really competes very well, but I'll talk more about that in the comparison section. Obviously, with an only 4-cylinder engine lineup under the hood, this isn't going to sound quite as nice with your top down as some of those 6 or 8-cylinder engine options out there, but the vast majority of manufacturers are now downsizing their engine entries as well. So the BMW 4 Series, the Mercedes-Benz SLK, they also have 4-cylinder options available. Even Ford has recently introduced a 4-cylinder turbo in their Mustang. The two biggest things about the A3 for me were how fun and how practical this vehicle is. This has made this one of my all-time favorite cars that I've ever driven. This is an absolute hoot and a half to drive out on your favorite winding mountain road. It drives incredibly well, even though it only gets 8 seconds 0 to 60. In fact, I was really surprised by that 0 to 60 time. I thought it would be much faster because the dual clutch automatic transmission and the turbocharged engine conspire to make this vehicle feel peppier than it really is. I think that's a good thing because you want a car that feels peppy even if it isn't out on the road, rather than a car that perhaps is peppy but doesn't really feel very responsive. I'd take the former. Pricing for 2015 starts at $35,600, which makes this not only one of the least expensive convertibles available in America, one of the least expensive luxury branded convertibles, but also one of the least expensive luxury branded vehicles, period, available in the United States. The A3 is also considerably less expensive than the other convertible options in the Audi lineup. This is $12,000 less expensive than an Audi A5 convertible, even though we have a reasonable amount of room in the back compared to the A5. Obviously, the A5 is a little bit bigger, but the difference isn't as big as you might think. This is also $7,000 less than an Audi TT, which is a two-seater convertible, not a four-seater convertible. The A3 also gives you a surprisingly high amount of standard feature content like standard xenon headlamps, standard leather upholstery, and two-zone climate control. Keep in mind that many entry-level vehicles, even in the next size category up from this, have fake leather interiors. So if you take a look at Volvo's S60, BMW 3 Series, Mercedes-Benz C300, Audi A4, etc., the vast majority of them now don't offer leather in the standard model. You actually have to pay extra for that, and you don't in the A3 convertible. Although some of the A3 options are relatively expensive, there aren't as many options available in the A3 as you might expect or as you might like necessarily. Our Model S tested here rang in at just over $42,000. If you want the 2.0 T model with the all-wheel drive, that starts at $38,600 and ends up at $48,200 fully loaded. That's a much narrower range than you find on a wide variety of luxury vehicles, and it makes the A3 a little bit easier to keep costs under control. Of course, the Mustang and the A3 are not the same kind of vehicle. The Mustang is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, this is a front-wheel drive vehicle, in addition, of course, to the different branding. But when you comparably equip them as much as you possibly can, the Mustang ends up right about the same price as the A3. We also have about the same kind of interior room in the Mustang as we do in the A3. According to a number of independent surveys out there, some people buy the Mustang just because it is a convertible and it's a relatively inexpensive one. If that describes you, then I suggest stepping up to the A3 if you want a little bit more luxury. It's a valid upgrade from that Mustang. Same thing goes for the Camaro. The Camaro starts at $31,055. We don't get nearly the standard feature content that we do in this vehicle right over here. Of course, it is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. It handles a little bit better, but the difference in handling between the base Mustang and the base Camaro isn't as big as you might think with the A3. Obviously, they have a rear-wheel drive bias, so they're a little bit more tail-happy in the corners, but in terms of neutral handling, the extraordinarily light curb weight of the A3 seriously helps out its handling numbers. Obviously, Volkswagen's EOS is a direct competitor to the A3 in many ways. They both come from the same parent company. However, the EOS, I think, is less of a value than the A3, strangely enough. Not only is it more expensive than the A3, it's about $1,000 more expensive, but we don't have the same kind of feature content going on the inside. Admittedly, we do have that hard top, and that's really where the majority of that cost difference comes from, but I think I'd rather have the soft top and have more trunk room and have more creature comforts and more luxury features on the inside, not to mention the better brand of Audi versus Volkswagen. BMW's Mini division was conceived as the luxury front-wheel drive alternative to these other luxury front-wheel drive vehicles available. So it may seem like the Mini convertible at $25,700 is the true value entry. However, you get a lot less power and not as good a handling in that Mini for the price. If you want to comparably equip that vehicle to this vehicle with about the same amount of power and about the same kind of performance and about the same kind of handling ability, it'll set you back just about as much at $35,750. For that cost difference, we get a better handling vehicle. I think it's also more attractive. It's definitely more luxurious looking, whereas the Mini is perhaps a little bit more distinctive. There aren't as many ways to configure your A3 as your Mini. However, we get considerably more room, especially rear seat room. Unquestionably, the A3 competes head-on with the BMW 228i convertible at $37,900. That BMW doesn't have quite the same kind of feature content that we get standard in this particular vehicle. Now, the 228 starts out with more power and we get less under the hood of this particular model. Even if you give this the 2-liter turbocharged engine, we still don't have as much power as you get in the 228i. If driving ability was the only metric that mattered, then the 228i would win easily over the Audi A3. It's rear-wheel drive, it has that rear-wheel drive dynamic, it handles a little bit better, it also has more power, and is faster in a straight line. I should also mention that I prefer BMW's iDrive to Audi's MMI infotainment system. However, the BMW is far less practical of a vehicle. Because we have that large hood up front, we don't have nearly the kind of passenger accommodations on the inside that we get in the A3. I found it much easier to jam people and the cargo that I regularly carry in this vehicle. The delta between the handling abilities of the 228i and the A3 is also much narrower than you might think. I found the seats in the driving position in the A3 slightly more comfortable, and I really appreciated the ability to open and close this top at 31 miles an hour. The Lexus IS250C is very easy to compare with the A3. They have about the same kind of interior room. However, the IS really is more of a 3 Series or 4 Series competitor in theory, as well as pricing structure. So at $43,360, it's not nearly as good of a value as the A3. The IS250C is also based off of the old IS platform, and as such it really seems dated on the inside when you compare it with the BMW 4 Series or any of those 4 Series sized alternatives. At the moment, Mercedes-Benz does not have a convertible version of the CLA or the current generation C-Class. As a result, the least expensive and most direct competitor to the A3 in terms of its overall pricing is the SLK 250. The SLK 250 is also the most different in terms of these comparisons because it is a 2-seat roadster, not a 4-seat convertible. To get the same kind of room that we get in this Audi A3, you have to step up to the BMW 428i in the BMW lineup. That will set you back $48,750 or considerably more than the A3 1.8. Of course, it will be faster, it will handle a little bit better, but the 428 is considerably heavier thanks to its hardtop. So the handling difference in terms of neutral handling is not as large as you might think. Same thing goes for that Infiniti Q60 at $48,550. We get the same kind of dynamics going on, but we have a much smaller trunk. That Infiniti Q60, when the top is down, has an incredibly small trunk. In this trunk, you can still fit 2 bags in there, even when the top is in this position. If you're looking to spend $35,000 to $42,000 on your next vehicle, you should definitely put Audi's A3 on your shopping list. This is a very practical convertible. It handles incredibly well. It's also very comfortable, very easy to live with. The A3 is my new favorite car. That includes both the 2014 and 2015 calendar years. So I would definitely put this over the Honda Accord Hybrid on the top of my shopping list, of course, for very different reasons. The way my favorite vehicles list works, of course, is what vehicle would I buy if I had to put my money on the line right now? And at the moment, it really would be the Audi A3 convertible. That narrowly beats out the A3 sedan and the Honda Accord Hybrid, which were the next two on my shopping list, with the Accord Hybrid being tops, mainly for its comfort, its practicality, and its high fuel economy. This vehicle is on the tops of my shopping list for its comfort, its practicality as a convertible, as well as the excellent driving dynamics. Even though this is a chop top and we do lose a little bit of rigidity in this vehicle, it still handles incredibly well. It handles almost as well as Audi's A3 sedan, which really is saying an awful lot. I'm not typically a fan of coupes or convertibles, so that really should tell you how much fun this A3 was during this January week in California. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this is Alexon Autos. You can find me over at facebook.com/AlexonAutos, over at Twitter as Alexon Autos, and you can always email your questions to alex@alexonautos.com. I'll see you next week. Do not, however, have an easy method of escape. Oh, thank God.